NVIDIA Omniverse makes me look great. So how did I make that video? Well, I started off, I went to Sketchfab. I looked around to try and find a model I liked for a pumpkin, because there's a NVIDIA community challenge going on that's talking about fall scenes and trying to create something related to fall. So I found this model by Tiago Lopez. It's available under Creative Commons attribution, so thank you. I downloaded that model as a USDZ file, USDZ, and loaded it up into Audio2Face and tried to then animate it to put the facial tags on it, and it failed. It came up with an error saying the mesh has multiple separate components, use mesh separate. In this particular case, that wasn't the solution, and I'm going to go through in this video and describe how I got around it, which is going to get somewhat technical. Let's dive in and I'll just walk through the process I used to pull apart and work out what's going on. So the first thing I did is a USDZ file is actually a zip file. So I made a copy of the zip file because some of the tools work better if you've just got all the raw files on disk. So I just renamed it to .zip. I then extracted all the files. And then if I go into the directory, there is a USDC file. C is the crate format, which is the binary format, and a directory with all of the textures. So good, we've got the actual file. Then I bring up my trusty USD composer. And what I'm going to do is dig into the project, go into that pumpkin directory, and I can add, oh, I put it off center, silly me, missed. I can add the pumpkin, great, it looks wonderful. Now, one of the things you can do in here, which is why I like it, is if you right click on the file and click edit, it'll open up in a text editor with a USDA rendition of it. And how it works internally is there's a series of meshes. I'm not going to go through all of USDA, but in particular, the problem that we're facing with this particular model, and if I jump down to the right one, is there's this second mesh which represents the full body. So there's one mesh for the stem, there's a second mesh for all the orange surface of it. This is the mesh I'm going to try and fix to get Audio2Face to work. And what happens is internally, getting into some of the details, is the face is a whole series of triangles. It's a whole series of faces where each face has got 3 points. So if we go up, for example, and have a look at the wireframe mode and zoom in, you can see there's lots and lots of little triangles to make up the surface of the mesh, and they all share the same vertexes, the points. So there's a whole lot of points with a whole lot of little triangles joining them up. And so it feels a bit crazy with all these being threes. I've never seen a model that has anything other than threes, but theoretically you could have 4 points on a face instead and so forth. I'm just going to stick with 3. There is then an array of indices. And so rather than just storing the points, which we've got later on, it also keeps track of which 3 points relate to a face. So it's saying point, the first, second, a little helper is a bit annoying. But if I highlight, so the first 0, 1, 2 represents the first triangle. The second 3, 4, 5 represents the next triangle, 6, 7, 8, so forth. So what's basically happening is every single one of these numbers is different for this Sketchfab model, and that means Audio2Face wants you to reuse the same vertex, so it knows that these meshes are connected. And because it's no reuse going on, it just gives up and says, I can't handle this mesh. So that's what we've got to fix. So why is this happening? One, they could have just done a crude converter and didn't bother about it, and it's just Audio2Face being fussy. But the other reason is there's actually 3 bits of data related to each vertex. There's its position in 3D space, which is an XYZ coordinate. There is normals data, which is a vector from the vertex showing which way is out, and it uses that to bounce light on it, and that's how you get nice creases and wrinkles and nice looking reflections off surfaces. So it knows which angle light should bounce off all the surfaces. And then there's a ST0, which is a 2D thing, which is also, ST is also related to UV. If you're used to UV mapping, that's what ST is talking about. It's ST, UV, W for rotation, XYZ. So that's what all those meanings of the letters are. And this is a percentage of the space in the texture map. So it's for pulling out. And so we've got 3 coordinates to say that's how I'm going to pull a little bit of that big texture map out and then paste it onto the triangle on the surface. Now, when we create a new vertex in the points array, it's got to decide, when should I start a new point? When can I use the old point? And you might notice there's this thing called interpolation. It gets appended as metadata. So if I go to normals, for example, we've got this array of normals. It's got an array, which is square brackets, this whole series of 3 XYZ coordinates. And then if I go to the next line, it's got this interpolation vertex. This is really important for what the problem is. Vertex means every single point has got a separate value in this array for its normal, and the same is true of the texture mapping. And you might say, well, that seems pretty good, doesn't it? Well, what it means then is whenever I add a vertex to the array of points, I've got to start a new vertex if either the position changes, the normal changes, or the texture mapping changes. And the problem is the texture mapping sometimes does need to change. It needs to change along where the seam is, because a vertex may be in it may be a member of 2 triangles, one to the left, which is on one side of the seam of the texture, and the other on the other side of the seam. And so what we need to do is to get a new mesh where this is no longer vertex, but it's called face varying. And what face varying allows you to do is to have one vertex, but then per face that vertex is involved in, then you can specify a new normal and a new texture mapping. And that's the thing that we've got to do to actually fix this one up. Cool. So how do we go off and fix that? Well, what I did was I went off and wrote my own extension. I'll make this code available, get rid of these little pop-ups, stick it up in GitHub, and I'll leave a comment in the show notes when I've got it up there. It's a very simple extension. Its UI is a single big button. You select a mesh from the hierarchy, you click the button, and it will create a new _, consolidated version of the mesh. And what it does is it runs through all of the data in the current mesh, all of the coordinates one by one. They always come in 3s. This code is not very generic. I just assume all face counts are 3, and then I can just hard code the thing in. To do it properly, it should be looking at the number of those 3s before it should be checking to see and moving a pointer along. Too bad. And then I create a new mesh and add the point to it. And if I look at the class I used to actually do that, so the magic here is I save the XYZ coordinate, but when I've created this one now, I've got this face varying flag set, and so for each face I have to write out the normals. The vertexes, oh look, I call this add point method, and it says, hey, is there an existing one with the same coordinate? Great, reuse it. But the normals and the ST mappings never reuse it, and that solves the problem. So let's see this in action. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually open up this the USDC file. So I'm modifying the model directly. I'm going to click to select a mesh. I've got this big button. I click this big button, and what it's going to do is create a new mesh by copying all the points across, but it'll deduplicate them. Now, the code's not very efficient. Don't care. I'm only going to run it once. This is more of an experiment. So we just let it run. And voila, we've got a new mesh. So I'm going to hide the old mesh. And so this is now the new mesh. I'm then going to save the file. I can then right click and go. If you right click, I started editing it before. I needed to finish the editing to release a temporary file and write out a new version. So I clicked finished editing, and then I started editing up again. So what we're going to do is look for the consolidated mesh, and then look for the vertex indexes. And if you look through this one, you start seeing some smaller numbers in there, and that means it's reusing vertices. So great, my new mesh isn't creating a new vertex every single point, it's reusing existing ones, which is what Audio2Face wants. Cool. Okay, so let's get our pumpkin now loaded into Audio2Face. So I've got Audio2Face here. I'm using 2022.2. I had some problems with 2020 3 with blend shapes, and I'm going to be generating blend shapes, so I just went back to the older version for now. And what we're going to do is open up the demo project, go into the pumpkin directory and add the pumpkin in. Now it's a bit big, so I'm just going to decrease it by a factor of 10. So here we are. I'm going to hide the other head that was there, and I'm going to come over to the character transfer tab. What I have to do is select the mesh, so this model has got, it's got one mesh for the little stem at the top and another mesh, and unfortunately you've got to drill your way down, get to the right mesh. And so here's my new consolidated mesh. If I come over and click the plus next to the skin, this is in the character setup tab, I now get a green tick, and that's where we're getting the problem before. It wouldn't work. So great. I then click character setup and saying, hey, you don't have any teeth or gums or tongue. That's correct, don't have it. It then comes up with this mesh fitting. This is where we add the points. And so what I like to do is I put 4 around each eye and I put some around the mouth. So I'm just going to fast forward the video here. Okay, now the mouth for this one's a little bit tricky because I've got these teeth sticking down. So I'm going to start with putting points at both sides of the mouth. That's fine. But I'm going to click on this actual tooth and on this tooth, because what I was finding is it was very easy for this top edge to pick up at this, and so Audio2Face thought the tooth was a part of the top lip. So I'm going to come down here and come a distance down just to help it realize that this tooth is part of the top, not part of the bottom. I'm going to do the same over here. I'm going to go up a bit there, and hopefully that will work. Normally I put one around the nose and cheeks and other things. It could add some jawbone. It just helps it make it look a little bit better sometimes. Okay, click Done Editing, begin mesh fitting. And doesn't he look wonderful? No, he's just been stretched by the other mesh. So then you do the post wrap, and it brings it back to the normal sort of thing. Why does it do that? No idea, but whatever. Now I want to generate, I've come down here to the blend shape generation, and I want 52 AR kits because that's what I'm using somewhere else. You can click preview in the stage, and it'll go through and modify the mouse around. Okay. So we've generated the blend shapes, had a bit of a look. There's some interesting ones, but fundamentally look okay. So what I'm going to do now is export down here in the bottom corner. We click the export. We're going to give it a, I'm just going to call it pumpkin blend shapes, and click the save button. Goes through the process. And we've now got 2 separate files up here. One's got a demo with all the blend shapes in it, and the other one, which is the important one, is this USD scale file, which is actually the blend shape of the skeletons. So we don't need Audio2Face anymore. I'm now going to come over to Composer. So what I'm going to do is, there's a tool that I've used, which I'll talk about in another video some stage, to generate a little animation project. And I'm going to merge this pumpkin into this project. So this one is using the same AR kit blend shapes. I'm going to load it up. It's just a simple little animation I created once before. Hit play, and it's using blend shapes to move the mouse,
makes me look
mouth,
great.
and so forth. So what I want to do is to replace her head with a pumpkin, because that's what you should always do, isn't it? So if I come into the demo directory, I'm going to bring across the pumpkin. I'm also going to bring across the original pumpkin, and the reason for this is you've got to put these things together yourself, as far as I can tell. I haven't worked out a good way of doing it. For example, that exported one is great. I've got the right sort of structure. It's put in a little bit of a skeleton for me. I've got all my blend shapes for all the different face positions, but it lost the texture. So what I want to do, I've got the original pumpkin, and here's the new pumpkin, and I'm going to take a copy of, actually I'm going to take a copy of everything. Copy prim, and I'm going to paste it up here. Paste prim, and then I can get rid of that one, and then I'm going to come into here, and I've got too many meshes in here because I want this little stem on the top, but I don't want this one. So I've still got the stem there. You can just see the stem there, and I've got the other pumpkin here. I'm going to then come along and say, here is the new mesh that I created, and you can see it's selected, but it lost the texture. So I'm going to come down, and I just happen to know it's called Lambert 2, which is from this materials directory that I copied across. And so I've got the texture back, but they don't line up. Bugger, so I've got to move things around a little bit. There's probably a better way. I haven't got around to working out what it is yet. I don't know why its origin is offset. I'll get there. Okay, so now we've got this pumpkin in there, but it's too big, so I'm going to come back. I'm going to add a transform, set the scale, make it proportional, 0.1, and we start to see that the pumpkin's the right sort of size. So great, let's move it up. So we've got the pumpkin over the head. What I'm going to do though is I'm going to come into the character, go into the skeleton, and I'm going to hide the face and the hair because I don't need them, so I just got the body. Otherwise you can actually see the face through the gap. Move it across a little bit, and on the skeleton of the pumpkin I'm going to tell it to use the animation clip from my world scene. So click select, moved again, not sure why that happened. Anyway, hit play. NVIDIA Omniverse makes me look great. This is just an example of getting the mesh across. We've got the blend shapes added. I've used a separate program to generate some blend shapes, but now we can animate pretty well any object. We can fetch off Sketchfab as long as we can get the mesh into a format that's Audio2Face is happy with, so it can generate blend shapes that work. See you later.